Hello, good morning and welcome to Bahrain for the season finale, season 10 of the FIA World Endurance Championship. Again, we find ourselves in the Kingdom of Bahrain to round out the year, and with every single title still up for grabs. This could not be a more pressure cooker environment. Well, we end up here as our sixth and final race, having started in Sebring in Florida and then rushed through Spa, Le Mans, Monza and Fuji to arrive here in Bahrain. And last year we had a 6-hour race and an 8-hour race. We're back to the standard format, the single 8-hour race today, tomorrow rather, to decide our titles. I'm Martin Haven, joining me in the booth, Graham Goodwin. Oh, and blimey, he has arrived. And Davidson in the pit lane will be joining us in a moment or two, Louise Beckett, as we get ready for the final free practice session of the weekend. And what we'll try and do in this session is to bring you up to speed with what's going on, who we need to watch, what the main runners and riders are thinking and hoping and wishing for. Final race ever in the GTE Pro category. Porsche are celebrating that with a multi-liveried look on their cars. You can pick out some of the liveries from the past. There's the sort of Rothmans and Pink Pig liveries they used at Le Mans a couple of years ago. And no sign of Rosso Corsa Red on the back bumper of that car, Graham Goodwin. No. We thought maybe they'd missed a chance to just turn the knife a little bit. Just
a smear, I'd have thought there. But no, it's great to see them making that effort. What entertainment GTE Pro has given us since the very start, but actually predates WC by just a single season. 2011 the first year for it, but great entertainment through the decade we've had the WC on track for. Now that doesn't mean that GTE as a category disappears, because for next year 2023 GTE will remain, before in 2024 the arrival of GT3 as the sole GT category. Now GT3 is a specifically non-factory category, as you can see from the lack of factory involvement in things like the Spa 24 hours, but we expect to see, you know, here in our category here, we have got Ferrari versus Porsche. Now we've had BMW and Corvette here as well, and Ford and so on in the past. But the big deal about GT3 and Davidson that should get sports car racing fans very, very excited is the breadth of machinery. Cars that we have never seen in GTE, like Mercedes, like Audis, like Lamborghinis and so on, all have GT3 cars that teams can race. So we've got Hypercar growing and sort of exploding in front of us, and the secondary tremors are going to be coming in a couple of years with GT3. So many more potential cars, different looking, different sounding cars on the grid.
Yeah, I don't think that the drivers are going to necessarily enjoy driving them as much as they do currently in the GTE Pro category.
It's not about them.
It's not about them, exactly. It's about our entertainment. That's what it's all about. But I think, look, it makes sense that you've got this category GT3 that exists elsewhere, you know, many other countries around the world. It's a universal platform now, and it makes complete sense that it arrives here in WEC. And it will naturally attract more manufacturers and more teams, and therefore more drivers. And for me, that's a better recipe.
Absolutely. And it makes no sense to have unity, global unity at the top tier with Hypercar as a sort of catch-all for all of these fabulous prototypes that are already running and are being developed and are rumoured to be being developed and then to have a very restrictive GT category. So, I mean, Graham, you and I have lived through the Group C era. You know, there are other eras of sports car racing.
I remember the days.
The 1960s, you know, the classic Ford versus Ferrari era and so on. And the GT eras of the 90s. But I don't think at any stage ever has even one category had as much potential as Hypercar is offering us in terms of variety, looks and sounds and different names. And then you throw in the same in the GT category. I mean, I genuinely am so excited about the next few years of sports car racing globally.
Well, let's put that into context, okay? For next season in Hypercar, more than double the full season number of cars that we've got this year. Bare minimum 11 for the full season next year. In 2024, we had at least another 5 to 7 cars. So if you add in cars that we're likely to see at the Le Mans 24 Hours, and of course we've got the centenary Le Mans 24 Hours coming in 2023, there's all sorts of other anniversaries to celebrate beyond that. We're heading towards the point where the top class will be at the kind of levels at Le Mans. We've seen LMP2 in the past, and for that matter, higher than we've ever seen GTE Pro. They're exciting cars, the development is coming quickly, they look different from each other, they sound different from each other. What you're seeing is it's attracting not just the factories, not just the people who want to run these cars as privateers, but brand new fans to sports car racing. And by the way, if any of you are listening in this morning and watching in this morning, you are very welcome. We're delighted to be live for this FP3 session. What I tell you from this point forward is, if you're enjoying it, tell your friends. Get them to watch along with us, because something extraordinary is happening in sports car racing here in the FIA World Endurance Championship, across the water in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, and it's only going to get better over the next couple of years.
Ferrari have not won Le Mans outright since 1965.
And Brendan, I would suggest we try to target 2 laps, and if we need 3, we take a third one, but not a must.
Yeah, copy. If I have traffic and I feel like I need another reference, then I'll take it. But if not, yeah, copy. I'll not.
And then for the tango, feel free to adjust for the second lap or third lap in case you feel any problem.
Wally Sim.
Yeah, copy that.
Yeah. Well, and Davison, I was going to get around to that before. I was just going to bait the hook with next year, Ferrari, everybody, Ferrari, hello, Ferrari! I mean, you know, all the other sports car legends. So you've got the greatest sports car team ever at Le Mans, Porsche, and you've got Ferrari. Now, 2 manufacturers that exist almost exclusively because they have raced their cars since day one.
And for Ferrari,
this thing, that 911, would never have made a penny if they hadn't been racing it since the day it was invented.
And here it is, more than half a century on from the first 911, still being evolved, still awesome, still a desirable motor car. Ferrari, I was at the launch for that car at Imola, massive show from the Ferrari factory, and thank you so much for inviting us along to see that. And huge interest, and better still, interest way beyond the traditional fan base for sports car racing. It is extraordinary. Great looking car, great looking livery, as a nod back to 50 years, by the way, since a factory top class prototype was entered at a World Championship level. 50 years, think about that for a moment.
Well, we know what Drive to Survive has done in terms of escalating the young, particularly young and non-hardcore motor racing fan in terms of their involvement with Formula One. So one of the names that all of these new people know is Ferrari.
Correct.
And they will then be following Ferrari on social media and everything else because they want that Formula One content. They're suddenly going to be overwhelmed by the fact that all of this sports car stuff is coming as well. So we are benefiting, we are going to benefit from Ferrari arriving and dragging along a Drive to Survive audience with it. And that is what is going to help this championship grow and grow and grow.
But there's much better news. Those people who've come from Drive to Survive to motorsport in general, Formula One in particular, now here, which is our team managers are actually nice people.
So, and we're going to hear from Eduardo.
1 minute to the start of free practice 3.
Ramsey fired Ramsey, in fact, who is Eduardo Freitas' assistant race director, who's been doing an awful lot of race directing this year as well, and who knows, maybe in the year or two to come may be the race director for World Endurance.
Well, 2 things to say about our good friend.
13 cars.
Number 1, if you can hear Bob Constantinos on the circuit PA, not going to hear that radio. Number 1 is he has been a race director this year in LMS.
30 seconds to the start of free practice 3.
And the second thing to say, a very proud moment for the incredibly enthusiastic group here at Bahrain.
Regarding the conditions, so yesterday you had tailwind into turn 6. Today it's 10k tailwind into turn 1. Okay, so different wind direction. Regarding the fuel, we are low on fuel, so 15 kilos, 1.5, so it's quality fuel. Track temperature, 38 degrees, 3.8. Yesterday in SP2 it was the same. Today it was 33, sorry. So we are plus 5 degrees compared to SP2.
Copy. To be honest, the tonight is better than...
Now that's interesting, because Anthony Davis, I was going to say, okay, we're hearing the drivers now talking about doing a quali sim run, and I was about to say, it's 11 o'clock in the morning, they're qualifying at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. What relevance can this have? But in fact, we've just heard the engineer saying, in fact, the track is hotter than it was in free practice yesterday afternoon, which is the same sort of time as when they will be qualifying. So in fact, it does bizarrely have some relevance, which in Europe we wouldn't expect.
I mean, the track will continue to ramp up in grip, obviously, as the day goes on, but it should have a bit more grip than it did yesterday, so it's got more relevance than it did in yesterday's FP1 or FP2 sessions, but it's still not ideal. You'd still prefer to have, you know, qualifying is going to be later on today, and I think we could go down to Louise, actually. Louise?
Let's hear from Louise Beckett. Good morning, Louise.
Hello there. Well, I was actually just about to say that I also think it's good for the drivers. We saw Paul Carolina after FP1 yesterday, Paul who comes from Canada, and so for them to get used to these temperatures, driving in these temperatures is actually a very useful tool.
That's a valid point. I mean, we all need to acclimatise a little bit. And last year, because we had basically 2 weeks here, it was a little easier. But it's very hard to get the body used to the temperatures that are inside the car anyway. Ant.
I do remember, actually, yeah, last year, the double header that was here, the first weekend was mentally and physically much harder than it was in the second week. And yeah, that's a good point that Louise makes there. Speaking to the drivers, it is hot down, isn't it? Katsuki Nakajima, also was racing here last year, looks on with the Toyota team, but it's physical in these cars around this track. When it's hot like this, it's humid as well, and it's a track where you really need to really be on top of the car, and any kind of mental fatigue due to being, you know, overexertion or dehydration, it really plays its effects out there, and you can lose lap time quite easily.
Peugeot 9X8 there.
Getting ahead of yourself.
The famously rear finless car, and has topped the times in both the first 2 free practice sessions. What we're going to see here, trouble here for the Inter-Europol, the Racing Bakers 34 car.
Straight back into the pit lane. So that was a quick installation lap, and then just I think we've seen a replay because there's a little bit of a lock-up over the ripples going in there. Peugeot fastest in both practice sessions. Now they got a little bit of a performance break in the balance of performance because, I mean, it's a brand new car. When we talked to them at Monza, they were saying, look, we're a test team. This is a test hack. We're not a race team. This is not yet a race car. This is where they're working from being testing team to racing team, because when next year starts, that's their for real year, and they've got Porsche, and we know that Porsche are not going to come half-cocked. You know, never mind Toyota and everybody else who's already here established, they're also looking at what might be coming next year, and you know, they'll want to win the title next year. They must make this car work. They must get an understanding for it.
Well, knowing how the balance performance works now, you've got that window of the 4 parameters, the downforce, the drag, the weight of the car, and the power that you have available. If you can meet those 4 criteria, and it's quite a tight window for each one to be within, then you can go racing, and the BOP will be adjusted, tweaked, race after race, to make sure that you can be as close to the fastest cars as possible.
Yeah.
And I feel like because we've had 2 races now with the Peugeot out there, that's also gone in their favour, that there's more data for the FIA to look at, and I feel like they're now coming into their own, where they're maybe they didn't have enough data beforehand, and that went against them.
Well, the other thing is, you know, wind tunnel data and CAD data and all the other stuff is all well and good, but as we know from Mercedes struggles in Formula 1 this year, converting that into the real world often gives you different answers to what the computers suggest. So there's all of that taken into a consideration.
Ant's point there about the parameters, the values, if you like, that define that balance of performance, define the cars now. There's an additional factor, and that's the factor that will mean that these cars look different. What's changed for Hypercar from LMP1 more than anything else, apart from the budgets that is it's a redefinition. LMP1 was effectively a geometric definition. Here are the dimensions you have to fit. You put those dimensions into any kind of CAD system, you're going to get a pretty similar answer. Now it's defined by a value. which means you don't have to put the hole above the wheel arch in the same place anymore. That can be, you can deal with that aerodynamic challenge.
And the diffuser doesn't have to
Bingo.
look the same. So you can, yeah, like you say, Graham, you can create anything you want, as long as it fits that quite narrow window of performance.
Absolutely right.
Not dictated by the way it should look in a physical restraint. So yeah, I like it.
And we've already seen, from what we've seen from Toyota, there's an evolution of their car coming, from the Peugeot, completely different. The Ferrari, totally different looking cars.
Yeah.
They're stronger in different parts of the track as well. That's something else I think we're going to get back to, that we lost as LMP1 hybrid budgets just accelerated away out of control. It's going to be great. I just can't wait for a full grid of these cars. It's already good. And by the way, we shouldn't forget that one of the...
You can brake normally up to T11 and then cool down the brakes after T11. Box, driver change to wheel.
So when they say hot driver change, it means that basically the driver, it's like it's going to be in a race, racing situation. So driver in, next driver gets into the car once Felix da Costa's out, and it's going to be Will Stevens, and they're going to race off as if it's a live pit stop.
And by the way, we should make clear, this is the Team Jota car, this is the championship leading car in LMP2, and next year Jota will graduate to the hypercar class. They're going to be running a single Porsche 963, one of two. The 963s in private hands. The other one, we can now confirm, will be from Proton Competition. And Jota will, alongside, run an LMP2 car for 1 year. Then they're looking to double up in 2024 with a second Porsche, if it's available, and so too will Proton, if it's available. The point I was going to make, by the way, gentlemen, is, lest we forget, the championship fight here is between one of the Toyotas and the Alpine, the last race for a car that was designed as an LMP1 car. And where are they on points, Martin? Absolutely identical points here.
Don't ask me technical questions like that when I clearly have not got the bit of paper in front of me.
That's number one storyline. GTE Pro, there is a gap. It's 11 points gap between the leading Ferrari and the leading Porsche. But this is an 8-hour race, so they get more points. And the difference between first and second for the points awarded here is 11 points. So how important could qualifying at that single point be later today?
When you mentioned the Toyota and Alpine, though, you're talking about the Drivers' Championship, not the car, because that's already been decided. Toyota are the champions.
And in fact, that is the only title, the manufacturer's title in Hypercar that has been decided. Everything else is going to be settled here, and every single player. And it's always the case when you get to the season finale, the 1 point from pole might make a difference, yes, but so did all the points for pole in the other previous races and so on. So it is the last over, it's the final over run chase, and it's 6 runs from 4 balls needed, but it's everything that got you there in the first place, brings you to that precipitous edge where you just have to close out the deal. And for Alpine, it might be a little bit more of a tough struggle here again. The history, the heritage of the car that debuted in 2018. It's been racing here since 2018, so this will be the car's 5th race in Bahrain in 4 years. It is a little bit on the back foot compared to the two Toyotas. Now, we sort of, I think, thought early in the season that Toyota were working on a replacement hypercar for the 010 for next year, but it is going to be an upgrade.
It is.
But you sense that there will be a, quote, Gen 2 010 coming along, maybe in the not-so-distant future. That might be for 2024.
It's quite interesting there, just looking at the Toyota on screen, Mike Conway behind the wheel, who's actually set the fastest lap so far of this weekend with a 48.3, as opposed to the Peugeot's fastest from yesterday of 49.6, who we see on screen now. And the Toyota barely pulled away from the Bratislava car, the LMP2 car, from turn 11 to the exit of turn 13. So it's, I think the key attributes that car has suit this circuit quite well, in that it's fast in a straight line. We've seen that all season. Big old run into turn 1.
We've seen a few big smoky lockups from the Peugeots under pressure, haven't we? Now, was that the beginning of a quick one or the end of a quick one?
I think they might have done their I think they might have done their quick lap already. He's done a 49.5, so that's faster than they've been so far this weekend. He's done, he's gone offline. I don't know why he's done. Maybe
that's an outlap. That's Norman Nato on an outlap, I think.
He's trying to avoid the bump there.
No, hang on a minute. No, that's an LMP2. No, where's?
Yeah, so that was Di Resta. Yeah, Di Resta was on his lap, but well, starting a flying lap, and he's tried to avoid the bump by going on the inside. But from my experience, that bump there into turn 1 is uniform across the whole width of the track. So, and then of course you get onto the dusty part as well, and this track being the tyre killer that it is, you get a lot of marbles starting to build up offline. So. Yeah, that's it's somewhere you need to run in a racing sense. You need to go offline there, but it's not going to help you with the porpoising, which that car, funnily enough, not having a rear wing, maybe relying more on the underfloor ground effects like the F1 cars do today. I feel like it's more susceptible to porpoising and bouncing than the Toyota is.
We did have that issue for one of the 2 cars, if you remember, at Fuji in the race, but it was one of the 2 cars. They pretty clearly were running some kind of different setup on that car, quite exactly what was going on. But they're learning. They're learning 2 things. They're learning how to set the car up to its optimum at the tracks we'll be going back to, and they're learning what breaks. And it has broken at both Monza and Fuji.
I was going to make the point about track knowledge as well, because you're saying, well, you know, in my experience, that bump goes all the way across. You know, Peugeot are lacking in that experience to a degree. Yes, you've got Jean-Eric Vergne and a couple of the other drivers who've done, you know, a lot of world endurance racing.
Well, Paul Di Resta himself, but every car's different and it reacts differently to bumps, and you know, you have to experiment, and that's what a free practice is all about.
But it's also what doing half the season is all about for Peugeot, is at least having some knowledge of the car when we come back to the clinchers at the end of next year, because if you go in with a blank sheet of A4 as your setup data, then you're obviously fighting at a slight disadvantage.
Paul Catalana, you mentioned Paul a little earlier, a stalwart of the FIA World Endurance Championship. He's left the... every Canadian, by the way, is for the winter given a bear to cuddle to keep them warm. He's left his bear back at home. He's out here and very warm indeed. Prema here. Now, exciting stuff coming from this Italian super team in single-seater racing. They been a dual campaign in the European Le Mans Series where they won the championship, and here in the World Endurance Championship where they've got a mathematical slight chance of still doing it here. We now know that for 2024 it will be the Iron Lynx Prema conglomerate, if you like, that will be the representatives of the Lamborghini factory in the hypercar class here in the World Endurance Championship, and with the endurance races in IMSA with an LMDH, we can explain that at some point, version of the hypercar and GTP concept.
That is a fantastic vindication, isn't it? You know, Iron Lynx, it's essentially a GT team that has come up through the ranks of the Le Mans Cup, European Le Mans Series, into World Endurance Championship, and not only, I mean, obviously they're probably their sort of tip of the iceberg above the water is the Iron Dames team, because the car is so distinctive. It's got the all-female crew. It's got that story. But the Piccini brothers, who effectively run the engineering side of that team, and the team management structure, clearly their ambition was to get to World Endurance, but that's not the end of their ambition. To tie up that deal with Lamborghini, to bring Lamborghini in as a factory for the first time ever into World Endurance Championship racing. We're not counting the J-Lock Lambo, because that wasn't a factory entry even remotely in any way, shape or form. To do that, and to not only say, okay, we're going to go with what we know in World Endurance, but to go straight into the hotbed that is IMSA, I mean, that's an enormous challenge, an enormous ambition. And that's, I mean, when I read that, I went, wow! Well, I mean, what a huge story.
The switch will happen through next year. So in the GT3 programs, yet to be defined exactly what we're going to see there, they're going to switch to the Lamborghini Huracan in 2023. Clearly that's not in the World Endurance Championship, because we don't have that class
yet.
They do, though, have a GTE plan, and that's that we know they tested after Portimao, the LMS. There's a big lock-up there for the number 41 real WRT car.
That was Norman Nato. That was,
but they did test with the Proton Porsche team, and I do expect that what we're going to see in 2023 is a single car in the European Le Mans Series and 2 Iron Lynx entered cars, but prepared with Proton competition. Probably one yellow one and one bright pink Porsche, and that's something to see. We've not mentioned, by the way, that the Iron Dames come here on the back of 2 things. One is a first time ever win, and a dominant win at that in the European Le Mans Series in a hotly contested GTE class. And they didn't just win it, they massacred the opposition. And the second thing is Darian Pah comes to Bahrain as the newly crowned Ferrari Challenge Europe champion.
So that's the second consecutive year that one of their drivers has claimed that crown, and they were also racing in the Lamborghini Festival last weekend as well. So plenty of action going on there. And actually, the Portimao thing, particularly in ELMS, I thought that was a great rounding up of the story, because they were going to win it last year on merit, on pace, having been knocked off twice during the course of the race. Sarah Bovey was still leading into the final half hour when the car basically set fire to itself from the engine bay forward. And that was their first win, and that was cruelly snatched away by fate. So it was just really nice to see it come back at the same place that it should have happened for them last year. So yeah, it's not a vanity project. It is a properly sourced, funded and crewed racing car full of properly fast racing drivers. The fact that they are female rather than male, frankly, is great news for all the female fans of sports car racing. But, you know, they're not winning because they're girls or women, they're winning because they're quick and good.
That's exactly the point. Good chance, by the way, just before we went to the pitting WRT car, or the real team car, for a long, lingering, not suitable for work shot of the glorious 4.2 litre V8, the Gibson V8 engine. That
no one's at work yet, are they?
All of the LMP2 cars around the world. What a fabulous dual-like thing that is. About 60 of those engines exist in the world. They're leased out to these teams on a timed basis. And that's the overwhelming soundtrack of international sports car racing in the last, half decade and more. And that will continue until the end of the 2025 season, we now know. We wait to see what the future is. The Inter-Europol car runs wide there off the circuit. It will return. There you go. Pops back into picture. We wait to see what the confirmation is going to come from the World Endurance Championship for the future of LMP2 in the WEC. We can speculate that we do expect that will be no longer part of the WEC, likely after next season, because there will be an abundance of hypercars and GT cars to fill the grid. But it doesn't mean, at this point, we can speculate, the end of LMP2 at Le Mans, because the European Le Mans Series and other series will provide a grid for that. So lots of development still to come, and we're promised the next stage in the LMP2 story by early December.
Now, we talked about the demise of GTE Pro, so that means there's nowhere for Corvette to race a factory Pro car.
Correct.
We will have a factory Corvette Racing entry of a Corvette in GT next year.
We will, so it will be a factory entered car. We saw it earlier, the 33 Aston Martin from TF Sports with Ben Keating at the wheel. Ben Keating will be, I think, the first ever de facto bronze-ranked factory driver.
That'll be his 43rd different car that he's raced in.
Every single
rules racing.
Well, the exciting part
he's raced cars that haven't even been thought of.
Well, here's the thing. Talking to my good friend Marshall Pruitt in the week, in our podcast we do, this is a pay drive for Ben.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we're going to see a yellow Corvette. So might there be an exciting livery to come with the Corvette. The second thing to say, by the way, is the professional driver that will join him for the season is also here this weekend, because Nicky Katzberg is actually on the support card, the World Touring WTCR in their penultimate ever race. Satoshi Yoshino there is looking warm, as well he might. And then the third part of that story comes into focus, because the day after the race tomorrow, we've got the so-called rookie test, and Corvette testing a couple of rapid silver drivers. So one platinum, one silver, one gold.
And you know that will be the deal. And you see here Northwest AMR. Well, Northwest is Paul Dallalana's company. That is the sponsor. AMR, Aston Martin Racing, that is the ProDrive factory Aston Martin team. TF Sport run 2 cars, they run 2 Aston Martins, but that is Tom Ferrier's own team. That is a private team. AMR is run out of ProDrive in Banbury. It is Aston Martin Racing. So that's exactly the deal. We're going to see it in Ben Keating's 4 Horsemen livery or wins or whatever it turns out to be next year. It may be yellow, it may not. Louise Beckett, how warm is it?
Well, I just want to add to that, obviously Ben Keating is at this stage a gentleman driver, and he runs car dealerships. And what manufacturer does he sell? Corvette.
Well, no, he sells everything. I don't know what car brands he doesn't sell, but yeah, every time I say he's got that many dealerships in Texas, he'll catch up with me afterwards and say, really? No, it's 23 now. Oh, okay. I mean, you almost literally can't keep up with how many businesses he has. But yes, no question at all. And he's driven so many different cars, unrelated to business.
We did say in this first time, by the way, we brought Free Practice 3 live through YouTube, and you're very welcome, those of you around the world tuning in with us. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are.
Good day.
We did say we'd take some questions, and I'll chuck a couple of the mix as we go. The first one comes from Oliver. I never get his name right. Trewavis. Oliver says,
Ollie.
OT, asks us to reminisce about the end of GT Pro and what were our most memorable moments or overtake of the Pro GT generation.
Actually, it's very slightly. I mean, Ant's going to have to do this when he does the awards presentations, because you know that's coming up after the race on Saturday. It's going to be kind of GT who. Because there is so much thundering over the horizon towards us. You know, the barbarian hordes are at the gate. It's dead to us now. I mean, almost lit. And it's got, hang on a minute, Louise has got a moment. I can't imagine what it is. Louise.
well, of course there are many, but one moment is Corvette, Aston Martin, Le Mans. What was it, 17?
You've stolen my one. I was going to go for that.
Johnny Adam.
Well, Duncan Vincent will have several.
Oh, yes.
But they will all be grumpy driver interviews.
It's odd enough, it's difficult to define which year, because it seemed like it was every year, and it usually came down to James Collado and Ollie Gavin, who I know is listening in this morning. Yeah. He'd be there gently in his bath chair, this Sucky Sweek as a retired race driver. Yeah. Morning, Ollie. Hope the cocoa's still warm.
And it was.
Absolutely. Side by side, down the Mulsanne. Yeah. You know, basically, who's going to break first?
Well, and in my head, I've got that heli shot with the Fords as well.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that 5 manufacturer.
Oh, it's bonkers.
Little peak. That was just. I mean, talk about bringing guns to knife fights. Everybody had a gun, and they were all loaded for bear. I mean, it was epic.
Well, in terms of finding out who was the best out there, the question we need to ask Ant Davidson, 2014 world champion with Toyota, of course, which one did you hate the most? Who was most difficult to pass?
Which GT Pro driver was the most difficult to pass? Well, I always found that the Porsche drivers had the most visibility, and they seem to have, therefore, the most awareness of your presence.
Yep.
Didn't necessarily mean that they were most accommodating in letting you by, but you always read from the body language of the car that they knew you were there. And
is that the best rear-facing camera radar system? Because theirs is very refined, isn't it?
I think it's quite good, but I think after sitting in a few of the GTE cars, they just have more window space.
Yeah.
And I think the drivers just have that extra peripheral vision that you need. Yeah. I found that the Ferrari was quite troublesome for the drivers for their visibility, which coincides with my epic crash with one of them, albeit an AM car at Le Mans in 2012. And I put that down to the fact when they're sitting on the left-hand side of the car that overtaking them on the right-hand side was always quite a risky business from a prototype's point of view. So I wouldn't say it was down to driver, but more that the car design would kind of limit their awareness of where you were. But I mean, one thing I always wanted, and still could be implemented in the GT3 category, and actually next year as well in the GTE category, is that I always wished to have a light on the back of their car, whether it was the, say, not gentleman driver or female driver, you know, the amateur driver.
A bronze light.
A bronze or silver light.
Yeah.
And then the pro driver, when they're at the wheel, didn't have a light on the car.
Yeah. Or the other way around. The pro driver has a green light at the back going, okay.
Just something to catch your attention from a way back, so that you could start to prepare yourself as to how you're going to attack that drive. Because the pro drivers, you know, you can just stick it down the inside. They're going to know you're there. They might make your life difficult by defending before you get there, but you would just have more confidence to arrive down the inside and be sure that they're on it. They're aware of your arrival. But if you had a different light to distinguish that it was an amateur driver, you might just think twice. A bit like coming up against an L plate on the road, or one of the green P, someone's just passed their test. You're the one that has to then play it a bit more steadily and
allow for a bit more vagary.
Exactly. And that's missing actually when you go. It's not good enough just to have the AM sticker on the back of the car, because it could very well be a pro driving that car, and that's really quite mentally disturbing for the.
Okay, now Gabriele Tarquini, former World Touring Car Champion, WTCR champion, is now the team boss at Hyundai, and I was talking to him earlier in the year and saying, you know, what's it like? And he said, oh, I've never worked so hard in my life. He said, all racing drivers should have to be a team manager before they're allowed to drive a racing car. He said, I can't believe what I was for so many years. If I'd known what I know now, I don't know, because you were a kid and you'd still have been how you were. Anyway, and Davidson, all drivers must race in GTs before they're allowed in a prototype, so they've got some awareness, because you've never sat in one.
Yes, you did.
But you'd not sat in the current one until we went to Sebring, and you got into the Ferrari and went, oh my God.
It had got worse.
What's this? Well, how do I mean? You're in a literal World War II pillbox with a slit in front of you.
To be fair, they have the guiding mechanism as well now. To that radar system to tell. I think is it the Corvette that started that.
It is correct.
That could then see who was coming up and which side of the car they were on with little arrows and stuff. That's really cool technology that I didn't have when I did the GT racing, but. It doesn't necessarily play out that way, because look at Nick Tandy when he jumped from the Porsche 911 to the 919, and he crashed into a 911 at Spa in his first race. Into turn 12.
So there's that.
Oh, that was all Nico Hulkenberg, surely.
Obvious.
Yeah, with the program.
Good luck arguing that with A. Tandy or B. Bamber. Meanwhile,
there was the not at all distinctive Iron Dames car, and in comes the 85 car.
Good morning, by the way, to Girl Talks Racing, who will be fully liveried in pink, courtesy of the Iron Dames team.
Let's add another couple. Lloyd Basson asks, should Toyota take a third car to Le Mans? They said they won't. He says, surely a Seb Ogier car sponsored by Red Bull would more or less pay for itself.
I think Ogier is quite happy going back to winning rallies, to be honest. I think he felt a little more out of his comfort zone, particularly in Sebring, than he expected to.
You're right, by the way, Lloyd, to mention the budget side of things, but here's the other point here, and one for you, Ant. It is already the biggest race in the world. Whatever else is going on in world motorsport, Le Mans is the biggest race in the world. Just that's not a debatable point. Second point, though, is these are teams that are used to running two cars for the overall win. The additional management, engineering, technical, physical, mental burden of a third car. Why would you want to take away from the push to do the best you possibly can at the Le Mans 24 Hours?
It's a good debate, because some people say you've got more bullets in the gun and all of that if you take more cars to that one race that you really want to win. I understand that, but it does definitely take its toll on sponsorship, the revenue coming in that you use or a manufacturer's money that you use to go racing. And also, I think the thing that's not really, well, it's more difficult to calculate and factor into is the toll it takes on a very limited workforce, or a spread thin workforce for just two cars. You throw in another car to the mix as well, and I've seen it firsthand in my time at that team actually, how even more limiting it can be for all of the resources and also the team personnel. It really does take its toll and can almost topple them off of their game. That slick operation you expect from a team like Toyota, it can be a little bit of a deterrent, actually.
And I think we possibly saw that with Peugeot in later years of the previous Peugeot iteration. The third car would be run by Orica. Or run by Pescara. So there is another car, but it's another entire separate workforce. However, Audi did make some fairly good mileage out of running 3 cars at Le Mans. The other side, the flip side to that coin is the year when there was only one Audi left standing and it was hopeless and they still won, and the year when there was only one Porsche left standing and it was a day back and they still won. Only one car can win Le Mans.
Correct.
So now, you know, it's like when you buy one lottery ticket and scoop the 300 million, you could buy 300 million lottery tickets, but only one of them is actually going to win the prize. And that's slightly facetious because you do have, you know, that's why there are so many 2-car entries, because you do have a much better way of balancing things and learning from each other. But, you know...
I do think as well, when it was an absolute standalone event, it made more sense. But now it is part of a 6-race championship that it is this year. It will be 7-race championship next year. You then have to start taking into consideration the sake of the rest of the championship. And then you have to decide what's really more important, a world championship or the Le Mans victory.
Le Mans.
Well, going forward in the future, with all these manufacturers involved, Ferrari, it's quite nice for Ferrari to say they're world champions as well. So that's the interesting thing about being part of a championship now.
There is another element, and that's the human factor. You talked about like finding the extra mechanics and all of that. Third drivers already say how hard it is just to arrive at Le Mans, even after testing, even after the 97 hours going around Motorland Aragon endlessly throughout the spring. If you don't do Spa, but you arrive at Le Mans as the third driver, you're not part of the team, not in the same way that the regular 2 drivers are. And that's why we've seen in previous years third drivers rocking up to Le Mans, to Spa, where they're strictly not needed, just so you've got that empathy with your 2 teammates before you arrive at Le Mans. So there are all those other factors as well. And if you've got a third car, that's 3 third drivers that you have to factor in. It's not beyond the wit of man to find them and to have them up to speed, but it's all just adds to the complication.
Completely correct. We're more than halfway through this session.
I'm going
to chuck a question to Ant in just a moment, just to kind of catch you up. You're seeing the graphics on screen. Leading the session is a Toyota 1-2, both into the 148s. 148.384 for the number 7 car, the sister car 3.5 tenths back from that. Then it's the 2 Peugeots, then the Alpine. Nearly 2 seconds separate the 5. WRT lead in LMP2, the number 31 car.
How the deck is getting higher, so everything is a little rough.
Yep, the top 3 cars in LMP2 separated by 56 thousandths of a second, by the way. 31 WRT for the 22 United and the 83 AF Corsa car in the GT classes is the Porsche number 91, not the championship lead, the championship challenging car, or rather it can still win, but it needs the other 2 challengers to fall off somewhat.
Take each other out on the last lap.
Jimmy Bruni with a 157.089. He's quarter of a second up on the 51 AF Corsa car, then the 52 AF Corsa Ferrari, then the 92 Porsche and the 64 Corvette, and leading again in GTM as it did in FP2. Team Project One's 46 Porsche ahead, as it was second in FP2. The 77 Dempsey Proton Porsche. 33 Aston Martin is running third at the moment. What I was going to throw to you, Ant, was this. This is a free practice session. It's the third of 3 that we have for every WEC race. 2 90-minute sessions we had yesterday, 60 minutes here. Quite often when people watch this, they tend to view it as a kind of race in itself, but that's not what's going on here. What are the teams working through in this 60 minutes?
Well, I mean, you can never have enough testing from a team's point of view, and personally I think it's 3 sessions before a race, endurance race, is arguably too much. You could get away with slightly less time, but it's important to run all 3 drivers through if you're in a category like LMP2 or Hypercar, to run all three drivers and get them familiar with things. But I think...
We are very slow down the straight. Very slow down the straight. I think we have to try a little bit more real weight. Also to help Heidi to see the speed under steer.
And just to prove the point, Felix da Costa on the radio there, still talking about car setup, feeling that he's a little bit slow on the straight in that car, feels a little bit vulnerable there on these long straights here in Bahrain. So
I wonder which straight, because we've heard that the wind has basically changed 180 degrees, so they're probably getting more speed down into turn one, which isn't really helping.
Yeah,
but then on some of the other straights, like the back straight behind the pits out of the hairpin, they're probably going, okay, I'm not getting full revs, I'm not hitting the limiter before I hit the brakes, what's going on?
He's either eyeballed another car out there, which is always a good yardstick of your performance. A bit like you see this little race going on between the Peugeot and the Alpine right now, and you come in your debrief and you say, yeah, they were definitely faster, or we were definitely faster in the straight compared to them. So Felix da Costa's feeling that in his car. And to answer your question, Graham, I mean, look, you can never have enough testing. There's always something. You never have the perfect car, just like you can never quite drive the perfect lap. It doesn't really exist. There's always got to be a compromise with car setup. And so the engineers have a plan, they try and stick to that plan, but if something suddenly goes against the drivers where they're really unhappy, you then have to change that plan and work around it to try and... So say like the car could be touching the ground way too much, for example, way too much bottoming. You then have to ignore what was coming up next on your run plan. It could have been a roll bar change or something in one of these cars, and that gets put aside to then combat the immediate problem. The main problem with track testing, I've done so much of it in my career, mainly as a test driver in Formula 1 for 6 years, is that you're always fighting the elements in real track testing. So that as the sun comes up, the track is nice and cool and you know, relatively speaking, here in Bahrain, you have your coolest condition at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, when the circuit would open. That's when you're going to do your best lap times. And then as it starts to heat up more and more, and you get to the midday sun, the wind usually picks up as well. That's a hindrance on performance. That changes car balance. We heard the engineers even talking about it before the start of the session, warning or pre-warning the Peugeot drivers. So you're fighting all of these constantly evolving variables which really get in the way of your test program, and by the end of it all you can come full circle and end up with the same car setup going into the race day as you've rattled through all the way through the week.
Bit of lock up there for the number 35. That's the ultimate car, one of our LMP2 Pro-Am entries. The Pro-Am entries, by the way, cars that feature at least one FIA bronze rank driver.
So it's knowing as a driver when to understand it's the elements going against you, and not just get transfixed on desperately trying every single and getting worried about trying to make your car perfect when the conditions are constantly changing.
There you go. Signatures on top of that car. This is a goodbye, and everybody's very sad to see this go. One other quick question to you as a driver. You talked about the sun coming up. It is very warm out there at the moment. Motorsport is one of those sports that TV can make look easy, or easier. How physical is it? And in particular, just give us a moment about the challenges of heat in the cockpit. What's that like? It's kind of like doing a light workout session in a sauna in clothing. Just imagine doing that, and that's kind of what it's like in the car in condition like this. It's all, you know what? Just to prove the point, I walked to the circuit this morning, walked towards the media centre, and I felt the heat as I got out of the car, and I did think to myself, glad I'm not driving today, because it's like preparing yourself for a fight. It really is. You know it's going to be tough, and when you're in it doing it, you get through, and the human body is an incredibly resilient thing, but you do lose kilos of weight in fluids through sweat. You do get dehydrated. You do start to get impaired vision sometimes, and your heart rate's going 9 to the dozen when you get out the car, and sometimes you feel like you're close to fainting. We've had many tests done on us before. I think Austin was one of those races in September. We used to go there, really hot conditions,
back in the early days of the WEC, and temperature was taken, body temperature after getting out of the car, and we were above 38.5 degrees Celsius.
Wow. Core temp.
Core temp, yeah.
Wow. I mean, we've now got, and it happened relatively recently, new regulations that determine the acceptable temperature in the car above the ambient, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if it is,
it's 6. I think it's 6 degrees above ambient is the limit.
So the cars have a variety of cooling systems, but this is not the kind of cooling system you have in a road car.
Interestingly, the Peugeot, you can just see it in front of us here as we ride on board with Jimmy Bruni. The Peugeot has an air conditioning unit. The Toyota doesn't.
Wow.
For weight-saving purposes, and it's another thing to go wrong in the car, of course. So I thought that was quite interesting. Peugeot always had air conditioning when I drove for them, and it's interesting that they've implemented it in their car as well. The Toyota doesn't have it. They never did, and I feel like they never will.
Remember having this conversation with Alvin Springer, who was head of Porsche North American Motorsport for many years after running Andial cars in Group C, and in their GT category, he was absolutely 100%. We need to have proper cooling for the drivers, and I was always saying, but you know, if the differential was overheating as much as the drivers, you'd fix it before the next race.
What's going on here? Sorry.
But the general plan is puncture. The general plan is drivers, just get on with it, suck it up, mate. And that's that's the nonsense of it that finally is being legislated for. That actually the human body, it can be genuinely dangerous to get too hot. It is a puncture or a loose wheel. He's not on an outlap, so it's not a loose wheel.
Oh, is it left rear?
Yeah.
Yeah, left rear looks
and he's staying well off the track and staying out of everybody's way. And
has he hit someone? Yeah, he was too busy waving. Gesticulating.
But he didn't drift it. Did the Proton car come out towards him off the curbs?
I think the Ferrari was kind of trying to make a point and moving out and gesticulating, and actually ended up making contact. So no, that's that again. Talking about that lack of visibility in the car, it's difficult to judge, especially when you've got one hand off the wheel and you're trying to have a bit of road rage. A lesson learnt there.
Michael Christensen, and there's still not a lot of love lost, by the way.
I was going to say, actually, never mind, not a lot of love lost. Bitter enmity.
Yes.
Still, I mean, they are still, and possibly understandably, extraordinarily grumpy about last year. I mean, to such an extent that they absolutely will not acknowledge Collado and Pierre Guidi on a podium when they're together. I mean, really,
I'll say this.
Really high levels of enmity.
You know, Ant knows from his time as a driver, my resting state when talking to anybody in this paddock is to pull a leg a bit to get a bit of a reaction. I won't do it on that one, because the reaction you're going to get is not going to be a pleasant.
I mean, it was absolutely Kevin Magnussen levels of live television. We really, but
what drama? And you know, that's been the thing with GTE Pro, isn't it? It is the drama. It's always,
and they still feel that it was stolen. Louise Beckett, I mean, it'll be a long while before any of us forget the end of Bahrain 8 Hours last year.
Oh, I still remember it very well, and right through to the awards, if you remember, because we had to change the awards that night because it was still undecided. But Ant, what I was going to ask you is that healthy, that level of competition between the two drivers, four drivers?
It's good for TV. That's for sure. Yeah, it's great for us, but. I think actually it's not healthy when you see it boil over like it did in Monza this year. I didn't like what I saw there, and it wasn't very professional from either driver that was racing the Ferrari or the Porsche at the time. I think it did boil over quite dramatically, and it was obviously remnants of what happened here, and like we were saying, no love lost there between the two teams. And, at some point you have to bury the hatchet, but it's obviously still way too raw. My fear is that it's going to roll into next year as well, with the two teams fighting each other and the same driver lineup pretty much fighting each other next year in Hypercar. Graham's chomping at the bit for that one, but I didn't like what I saw in Monza. I thought it was dangerous. It wasn't professional, and you know, these things can happen when competition gets beyond being friendly rivalry or even just rivalry, that was actually bitterness that came out.
I don't know what poor Fred Poordad had done in that 88 Proton Porsche to need James to sort of give him a flyby at the bird or whatever.
Something happened in the run-up to that.
You sort of sense that maybe he chopped him unwittingly, and James had then come back down into the right-hander and gone past him and given him the bird or whatever. But I mean, again, you know,
he'll be seeing the race
James Collado, who was in a Ferrari. You are a world champion. You want to be a world champion for the third time. Stop chopping drivers who inadvertently have blocked you in free practice. Just focus on, and I think that actually shows how taut all the nerves are.
I agree.
I mean, how taut, because Ferrari, and particularly James and Ale, are going to be very worried that they're just going to be torpedoed at some stage. And similarly, you know, the 92 Porsche team similarly are going to worry that the other Ferrari is going to try and take them out of the game, and that's not how either team, I think, are going to play it. But the fear of the unknown and the potential that might go wrong is there. What's now happened is that car, that Ferrari, he has gone back out. I'm surprised if you have a shock like that to the drivetrain. 16 minutes left. No, just park it and just double check everything, because what you don't want is for him to go out and start leathering it in practice and then to find out a drive shaft's a bit duff.
So if you're enjoying Free Practice 3, we certainly are. Hope you're enjoying being with us this morning. Remember, there is a variety of ways to catch up with what should be an epic qualifying session this afternoon, and then 8 hours of racing tomorrow. FIAWEC.com, and have a look for how to follow. There's a variety of ways to do that, either online with the WC app or a variety of broadcast stations around the planet. Do keep an eye on that. But the one thing, if you are a relatively new fan to the FIA World Endurance Championship, is the sports car racing, and it's another one to throw your way. And because of the variety of things these races can throw at you, the strategy, how important discipline is into and on pit lane, and in particular traffic, these races always throw up drama.
Does, yeah. Like I always said, going into any race, something always happens.
Yeah.
So it never just goes to plan. You never just start your race where you are. And that's why I always said that qualifying, as exciting as it is, and we all want to see who does the fastest lap times, blah, 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 it bears little reference for what's going to happen in the race, because something always happens in sports car racing, in endurance racing, which is exciting. You know, lots of multi-class categories. It's like having people that are new to this form of racing, maybe watching for the first time today, FP3 here in Bahrain, WEC. It's like having F3, F2 and F1 all out on the same track together.
Just prettier.
Just so and you know, get on with it. The blue flags mean very little. That's one thing I learned through myself. They mean very little indeed.
Someone's waving at me.
Yeah. So, oh, that's a pretty colour. I'll just stick to my racing line, thanks. So, look, you see moments like this all the time with an LMP2 car behind a GT car, pro drivers mixed with amateur drivers, and you see it at moments like we saw with James Collado and Poordad. You know, these things happen in sports car racing, and it's what makes it. It's the factor of the unknown that makes it so entertaining.
I'll go this far. We've got all of those championship fights still up for grabs. There's zero doubt in my mind that at least one, and probably more than one of those, are going to have real on-track drama affecting where a World Championship is going to end up by the end of Saturday evening. And remember, it is a Saturday race here in the Kingdom of Bahrain. 91 car has an outside chance of the championship for Jimmy Bruni, because Ricard Leitz missed a race with COVID, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But Jimmy would require the 51 and the 92 to both hit drama and or each other. I'm not counting that out, actually, at this stage.
Well, you know, look, I mean, we're all fans of sports car racing, and of course, you know, the pinnacle of that is Le Mans, and Le Mans teaches us year in, year out, nothing, no matter how ridiculous, is actually impossible.
Exactly, yeah.
And actually, frankly, some of the greatest Le Mans have been where the most frankly ridiculous things have happened, and usually it involves enormous heartbreak for somebody. You know, everybody is well aware. Yeah, there's Richie, and he's really disappointed. Jimmy's really disappointed as well because, yeah, Richie missed a race, but it's not like they've had sort of a revolving door of assistory talent. It was out of his control. And
well, Jimmy Bruni's now got a Le Mans win with Porsche.
Yeah,
he's a multiple WEC world champion with Ferrari, or champion with Ferrari. It's before it was world championship. Richie Leeds, another champion of WEC, before it was an official FIA World Championship.
Yep.
So the quality of drivers in this GTE Pro class is absolutely astonishing. Running quickly back to the questions we got with under 10 minutes to go now. No major changes, by the way, in the fastest laps. It's a question that comes in from the Iron Dames. And the Iron Dames would like to know, why are we your favourite team? So not in any way a leading question. I as I said on Twitter, it's all about the pink. A quick word about that effort, because I love the inspiration. I love the inspiration it's giving to people.
Yep.
And in the time that you've been part of this paddock, I think you'd agree, walking down the pit lane as we arrive at these race meetings, the vastly increased number of female faces in all sorts of roles in the FIA World Endurance Championship and across motorsport is, for me, an absolute joy. We're talking here engineers, technicians, team managers, as well as, of course, drivers, and in all the other support roles we see here. There is not going to be a team there that we don't have a female figure in a position of responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, honestly speaking, it's now so commonplace in our sport. You know, it's not just the World Endurance Championship, of course, I talk of. It's so commonplace that I don't even notice it anymore. Yeah. And that's happened in the last 10 years. Yep. So it's been a very quick transformation. But like you say, every department of every team will have, you know, female influence and inclusion in all aspects of life. All walks of life are involved in the quest for performance. And that's, I think it's, and then I think actually it's the drivers, ironically, it's the female participation in terms of a driving sense that is a bit behind the curve, and that's, you know, it's the most kind of inverted commas glamorous job of all, isn't it, for anyone to want to do, to aspire to be a racing driver.
You can understand that to a degree, because if you are a motorsport nut and you love the engineering side of it, you are as likely to get hired without anybody looking at the tick box that says M or F on your graduate CV. But to become a driver, you need money behind you. And I don't care whether you're male or female, you need money behind you. So let's say your daughter decides she wants to go karting, you need the money to support that as much as you do with your son. So it is harder to get in for everybody, and as a result, maybe because there are many more boys who are still into motor racing, as there are many more girls who are into equestrian sports, say, than boys, then you see right at the top level, you see, you know, you go to any national horse event, there will be far more female fans, participants, than there are male, and motorsport is sort of the other side of that coin. It just appeals a little bit to the very simplistic, basic, only able to deal with one thing at a time male brain, I think, and to become involved in engineering or race control or scrutiny or anything else, I think it's possibly more accessible for females. Louise Beckett, what's it like trying to get into the pit lane?
Well, I think that we need to recognise the work from the FIA and Women in Motorsport and the Girls on Track initiative, because without a doubt, over the years, they have helped to promote that and show that there can be equality within motorsport. In the years I've worked in it, I've seen a huge change in how many women work in this sport, and it's great to see. And looking at those drivers like the Iron Dames, how those three women work together as a driver trio, I've never seen that same bond or how they work together in any male trio, and I have to say that that's something I've noticed this season in particular.
Yeah, I think they have sort of embraced the fact that they are the, if you don't see it, you can't be it, figurehead. Yeah, and they really, you know, the entire unit, the entire team, accept that they didn't go looking for it, but this is what part of their role is. But yeah, I mean, they are, you know, you look at some of the great driver lineups, you know, that our friend Alan McNish has been involved in, and there's that level of trust and empathy and camaraderie, and they've only been, you know, together a year.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because what I was going to say to wrap this one up, we're into the last 5 minutes of the session, is Lou's absolutely right. Sometimes we get wrapped up in some of the minutiae, and there is some fantastic work going on from the FIA, an organisation that quite often, and sometimes legitimately, gets a bit of flack. But we should remember some of the individuals who've made some of those fantastic contributions. You mentioned Alan and that effort. We can't mention that without mentioning Lena Gade.
Yep.
And the efforts that Lena's put into that drive.
The fourth part of that so many, you know, Le Mans winning crew.
Not just in terms of her excellence in the engineering side of things, but actually what she's done since within the sport.
Yep.
Also people like Beth Beretta across in North America, you know, a senior executive in the motor industry,
yep,
who's gone on to be a flag bearer for women in motorsport. And then the two heads of the Women in Motorsport Commission at the FIA, now retired from that, Michelle Mouton, one of my all-time sporting heroes.
Absolutely.
And now Deborah Meyer, who is the brains and the resource behind the Iron Dames effort. Congratulations to all of you. You have changed our sport, and it is absolutely universally for the better.
And who's the head of Cadillac Racing, Corvette Racing?
Laura Wontrop.
You know, there is no job. You know, Lisa, who was Eduardo's assistant for the last couple of years, not the current Lisa, but the previous Lisa, now race director, FIA race director for the ETCR Electric Touring Car World Cup. And Lisa, who is currently the assistant race director, very likely to follow the same course as well. So there are no doors, hopefully, that are shut. And actually, it's not just within the governing body. Racers like Pippa Mann in the States, who knows what it's like to try and fight your way up through Formula 3000, Formula 2, Indy cars. She is creating an all-female racing group of racers as well, to try and bring that awareness and bring that focus that isn't sort of prevalent yet in US motorsport. So there are so many people from so many different directions. You know, we talk about Lena Gade. What does her sister do? Her sister Tina, she's an engineer. She engineered, you know, factory minis in their rally program. Right. So, you know, it was their family love. They were just maths geeks. They loved engineering. They loved cars. You know, and dads don't just give that to their sons. They give that to their daughters by dragging them to Brands Hatch on a wet Wednesday as well.
2 minutes to go in this 60-minute session, and with most of the teams, I'm sure, having had a crack at least at a...
It's the start of the second stint. It will be very good. Let's see what else. It's a working. No lift up. No lift up. You can push on energy. You can push on energy. No lift. Okay, copy. Grip 5, strike 1. Copy, grip 5, hard 1.
Also, by the way, any audio engineers, if you can work on a system that allows radio transmission from ship to shore not to sound like you're literally doing it from underneath the water, that would be really a bonus for all of us.
It is going to be Tota finishing this session 1-2 with a 7 ahead of the 8, then 2 Peugeots and the Alpine in the hypercar class.
A little bit disappointed to see the Peugeot 1.1 seconds behind. Yeah, I expect them to be closer today.
A bit of a lock up there again from the ultimate car. It is going to be WRT that finished the session on top in a very tight LMP2 class. WRT head of United Autosports by 18 thousandths of a second with the number 83 AF Corsa car. What's that? 3 hundredths further back. And then the championship leading 38 car, the Jota car, fourth quickest, a couple of tenths away from that too.
Just saw a little smile, by the way, from, if you didn't recognise that face at WRT, that is Thierry Tassin, multiple winner of the Spa 24 Hours single-seater race, sports car race. If you were a Belgian racing driver and you're not involved in WRT, you weren't a Belgian racing driver. And they have the ability. They're guys like Kurt Mollikens, who raced in 3000, ran his own team. You know, they've got that ability. There's sort of this specific mass. It just brings talent in.
And we haven't mentioned so far, by the way, that's another team that in 2024 will be back in the hypercar class, bringing the factory BMW efforts.
Yep.
They switched their GT efforts from Audi to BMW for next season, and that will graduate up into the hypercar class, bringing 2 more cars to the FIA World Endurance Championship in 2024.
Well, the words WRT and Audi have been so synonymous for a decade and more, almost like Penske and Porsche. You know, they sort of work together. And Audi's decision to try and fill the money hole that is Formula One, rather than come and win Le Mans or anything interesting, has obviously left WRT looking for somewhere else to go. And the deal with BMW, yeah, I mean, it changes everything that they do. So from now on, you know, all of their GT3 program, all of their hypercar program will be BMW centric. So I mean, great A that BMW is coming back in spades, but B that they've got such a really strong team to partner up with.
The only remaining question there is, what if any part in that hypercar program might Valentino Rossi play? He's got a lot to prove in GT3 racing next year in a car that he thinks suits him better than the Audi. Just one quick thing to report as the cars are passing the checkered flag now. It is as they were in GTE Pro. Porsche's 91 911 RSR will finish the session on top ahead of the 51 and 52 Ferraris, and in GTE AM it will be another Porsche, the Team Project 146, but the 54 Ferrari, the AF Corsa car, has popped up in second fastest place there, splits the Fit 46 and the 77 Dempsey Proton racing car. With the exception of that one puncture, I didn't see, other than a few lockups here and there, any major problems for anybody.
No, 3 of the top 4 in GTE-AM are Porsches. And then 5th fastest is the best of the Aston Martins. That's the TF Sport car number 33. That's the Ben Keating driven car. So GTE-AM remains for next year as the only GT class. And GTE Pro will vanish at the end of tomorrow's race. A little bit of rubbing and racing. Who was in the 34 car right at the end of the session? That was Alex Brundle. I sort of sense that possibly that might have been Alex not particularly being pleased with being eased out onto the dirt. Yeah, no, go on, get out of it.
So again, a reminder, next up for the World Endurance Championship here from Bahrain is qualifying this afternoon, and the timing for that is?
It is 13:40 GMT,
yep.
16:40, yeah, not in like 10 minutes from here. 16:40, so we will be on in, what's that, 4 hours and 40 minutes from now. So if you've just finished the school run, yeah, it'll be sort of approaching lunchtime. Yeah, 12:40, so.
And they split the categories, unlike in Le Mans, they split the categories in the World Endurance Championship, the rest of it. So it's the GTEs, or the GT going out first, and then you've got the prototypes going out after them.
But bear in mind, that is 12:40 Greenwich Mean Time, which is 07:40 Eastern. So that's quite reasonable. That's not bad. West Coast, okay, a little more and social. So you can do Pop Master. You can you know, turn Jeremy Vine off, but qualifying is a very short session. It really is blink and you miss it. So 12:40 GMT, 16:40 local, 13:40 Central European. You have to join us there.
If you want to watch it, FIWC.com with the ways to watch. If you can't watch it, but you can listen, via the timing screen on the FIWC.com website, you'll see a little radio icon at the top, and we are live and free in audio on that service. So you can listen in to Martin, to Ant, to myself, and to Lou Beckett down in pit lane for all the action for that, and of course for the 8 hours of Bahrain tomorrow. That is going to be an absolute cracker. Can't wait.
Yeah, we'll do the same during the race as well. If you have questions, if you're watching endurance racing for the first time, or you've only sort of seen bits of Le Mans and you go, well, why is that there, and how come Porsches aren't faster than these funny looking things? Because Porsches are like really fast, and so are Ferraris. We'll try and get into what multi-class racing is all about from the grassroots up. But it's at Ant Davidson, at Martin Haven, at DSC editor is Graham Goodwin's handle, so you can tweet us messages while Twitter still exists, by the way. Because that dumpster fire is going to be more entertaining than the final day of GTE Pro, and it will give and give. So here we go, final results from FP3. We'll try and get Louise to catch up with some of the runners and riders in a moment. Toyota 1-2 from Peugeot and Alpine. WRT on top of the pile, trying to win their first World Championship, and that's a huge thing for them. Ahead of the 22 United car that seems to have found its mojo again. And look, third fastest of all the way through the session, is the lead Pro-Am car, Francois Perraudin and his teammates in that 83, the Chrome car. Prema, could they be world champions on their debut at this level? They are such a good team. It is entirely possible. LMP2 is going to be wide open. GT, well, there are 3 cars that could win it. And the Porsche 91 is ahead of its 2 Ferrari rivals. Corvette will see out their participation in GTE Pro as they move to AM next year. 3 Porsches in the top 4 in AM, with 1 Ferrari and 1 Aston Martin joining them. And the Iron Dames 6th quickest, having won in the European Le Mans Series in Portimao against a quality field. Could they finish up on the podium here again? They've had a couple of podiums this year and a win in ELMS. Could they do it in the World Endurance Championship? The answer is yes, they could. Anything could yet happen. Here's Kevin Escher with Louise Beckett.
Lots of activity happening in the 92 Porsche garage. You've got a lot of work on the car to do here in Bahrain.
Yeah, for sure. The temperature makes it tough, and the gap of temperature between the start of the race and end of the race is quite a big challenge to set up the car and find the right tires at the right time and right strategy. So yeah, it's difficult, but we are trying to figure this all out, and hopefully we took the right decisions in these free practices.
I don't want to, talk about the inevitable, but I need to. This is a big weekend, not only for you in the championship, but also the GT category.
Yeah, no, it's for sure a very emotional weekend for the GTE Pro category. For last time here with the RSR, last time with this group of people in this championship. So and we've had a lot of success and a lot of good times, a lot of bad times. But for me, it's now my 5th year, so it's been a long part of my career. So I really hope that we, at first, we will enjoy it, that we'll have the pace, and that we'll fight for the championship.
We're all looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, for everybody that's been involved, and it's teams, it's drivers, it's the designers, it's the marketing, it's everybody. It is the end of one chapter. But for those drivers, those teams, those engineers, and all of our fans, those teams aren't going anywhere. Those names, Porsche and Ferrari, as pro teams, they just leave GT to come to Hypercar.
To fight them, who you're looking on screen now.
To not just win in class at Le Mans and at Sebring and at Spa and everywhere, but to go for outright glory.
I'm more excited than I am sad, definitely. Yeah. It's a shame to see the end of these epic cars, the GT, but they don't fit with the way the modern world is. Your GT3 fits more as a production car. The GT Pro isn't a production car. It is a prototype in a sense. So if you want to do prototypes, go and fight Toyota.
The other thing that I love about GT3 is the breadth. We will have all sorts of new cars that we don't normally get.
There's a lot of riding on this weekend. You're running second in the category. But the car seemed to be in a lot during that session, maybe 10 laps less than the rest of your competitors. What was going on in this free practice?
Yeah, so unfortunately we had a bit of contact with Alex in the car yesterday in FP2. Nothing he did wrong, just a little bit of an incident on track with another car. And we think it damaged the suspension, so he had suspension failure this session, but the team did a really good job. They got it fixed pretty quickly, and we were back out on track. So we got time in. Unfortunately for Ollie, he had to take a back seat, but I think Alex and I have enough info for him to jump in straight away in the race. So it should be good. Just a small incident, and the team got through it as quick as they could, and we're back out.
Great, thank you.
Of course, thank you.
That was, by the way, young Josh Pearson, the youngest driver in this field, the youngest ever starter at Le Mans, this year.
So the background to what he was talking about there with damage to the car was apparently yesterday Robin Freins was the driver that got held up on his fast lap by Alex Lynn. So he, in the same way that we saw James Collado getting a little bit argy-bargy with other cars for holding them up, he did the same to Alex yesterday. It seems like he made contact with the car to the point it damaged it, and that's what Josh was just referring to.
I don't think I'd have been quite so polite in those circumstances if I'd been Josh, but then again, he's a young man. He's got a lot to learn yet.
So it's all.
He's a very professional
quite
young
heated.
man.
It's
That's
very
where
heated.
we are.
Well, that is it for our free practice show on the 11th day of the 11th month. And we remember all of those who lost loved ones and who gave their lives in the ultimate sacrifice over many conflicts. We will be back for qualifying at 16:40.